Just waiting for the recording to commence, and then we will start off. So welcome you all back. We are almost reaching towards the end of the FDP, and the way we have progressed so far, absolutely we are on track. Whatever we wanted to deliver and how we wanted to deliver, that is going as per the design. In this session, some of the questions and the doubts that you all had will probably get clarified. And I also want to tell you upfront that we are looking at this, the perspective of this program is, since it is driven by the Government of India, primarily the participants are from the educational institutions. I assume that a lot of you would like to acquire this new knowledge on the design thinking with the objectives of either offering this course in your respective institute, or maybe you want to do some further work on either research or do something to do with some innovation. Some of you are leading entrepreneurship cells in your respective universities. Some of you are entrepreneurs, and maybe some of you are aspiring entrepreneurs. Therefore, we thought that all this should logically be leading to how an organization should acquire the capability of design as a part of its DNA. And why is it now necessary? And what are the competencies? If you are a design thinker, what should be the competencies that you should be having? So with that perspective, we have crafted this particular session. This is very, very unusual in many other programs that you see on design thinking, but we thought that we should give you something which is novel, and therefore this session is offered to you. The learning objectives of the session are basically to understand design thinking as not as an individual capability alone, but at an organizational level. How do you build it, and how do you see the future of the organizations, and then explore the capability model. If you say that you want to build it as an organizational capability, is there a way that we can do it? How do you do it in the future? We are also assuming that many organizations do not have this capability now, and they need to develop this capability. Then can design thinking also be integrated into the organization strategy, and what should be the competencies of a design thinker? So these are the outcomes. At the end of the day, probably you will take home these learning outcomes to yourself and to your organization. Here is a great quote by Steve Jobs, and let me quote. Most people make the mistake of thinking design is what it looks like. People think it's their veneer, that the designers are handed this box and told make it look good. That's not what we think design is. It's not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And from the perspective of the organizations, it is how the organizations work in future is a big area for research and understanding. And Tim Brown said, and I quote, design thinking can be described as a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. Purely Silicon Valley, American background, naturally he will talk about business, but then going beyond the business, it also has the social engineering capabilities. Design thinking can be used for social engineering as well. Now, design thinking, to my mind, is what it used to be the TQM in the 1970s and 80s, maybe the late 1970s and 80s. Globally, we have all talked about the full form of TQM is Total Quality Management. Organizations were confronting with quality problems, and there were some examples where certain countries were able to invade the global markets And therefore, a lot of theories have come around that. And TQM is not a technique or a tool. TQM is a philosophy of the organization. And a lot of things have developed and evolved since then in the last close to 40 years. So TQM is basically a management system for a customer-focused organization. We are talking about customer-focused. I will tell you why it is important. That involves all employees continuous improvement. Continuous improvement. It uses strategy, data, effective communication to integrate the quality into the organization's culture and the activities of the organization. And this entire moment of quality or the TQM was centered around the productivity. And subsequently, after Michael Porter has come out with the competitive strategy, everybody started about talking about the competitive advantage of the organizations. And that has worked very well for about 40 years for the industrial organizations, and they've prospered. But now, probably 40 years later, that is not enough. And therefore, something new is evolving. What is that new thing that is evolving? If I can tell you, today people are not satisfied with the solutions, the products, the services that we have. People want more. Why do you want more? Why do we want more? It is because there is technology. Technology is changing. The business environment today is far more dynamic than what it was few decades ago. And hence, on the back of technology, with the economic prosperity that has happened, the users at every part of the world are looking for a better solution. We know when calculator was started coming in into the market, we were quite thrilled. But today, we are not satisfied with integrating everything into the cell phone, a calculator, a watch, a telephone, a communication system. Everything is into the simple small thing like a mobile phone. But still, we are not satisfied. We are looking for more superior solutions as of now. So what is that we are looking at is today users are having better expectations, more expectations because of technology. And there are diverse views about what a customer wants in different parts of the country. And therefore, there is a need for innovation. And the companies, organizations, governments have to deal with those challenges of innovation. Number two, today the cost of failure is more. If you fail, maybe you look at the case of Nokia, which was the darling of any mobile user for so many years. Today, we really don't, it doesn't come to us as a first recall value. The cost of failure is much higher than it was earlier. And as you were all aware and you were also talking about it, today, environment is also very important for us to protect for the future, sustainability of environment. Then we need to change. We have to manage change in this changing environment, in this dynamic environment, at the individual level, at the enterprise level, and at the society level. So it requires a different perspective. When TQM was there, change was not so much pervasive at that point in time. Organizations looked at profitability, creating products, reducing wastage, reducing rejections, and becoming more and more productive. But today we have crossed that stage. We are now looking for much more than what mere productivity is. And then stakeholder buy-in is important. When you are doing this, dealing with this challenge of innovation, we all have to deal with carrying the employees with us. So keeping all this in mind, if you understand design thinking as a capability, not merely as a tool, as a process, as a capability, then you have a whole lot of things to do. And since most of you are from academic background, I think it will also keep you open for some genuine original research where you can pursue and contribute to the body of knowledge. Okay, I just want to pause here for a minute and ask you, does it make sense? Am I connecting the thing that has happened in the last few days, and are you able to appreciate this? Yeah, I'm waiting for some answers from you because I don't want to give you something that you don't. I want you to.
Sir,
Can I say, sir?
Yeah.
Sir,
sir, it is connecting well, and it is connecting well, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Dr. Sunil.
yeah. See, I would like to submit here because I myself is the quality examiner, sir, and quality assessor. So I have gone through what the entire TQM from Malcolm Baldrige perspective, even from EFQM perspective. And for last 10 years, I'm also giving feedback for the online improvement, projects rather, Six Sigma based. But yes, there was some kind of feeling amongst the company management, company employees. They were the in charge of projects, and even we examiner, we so-called kind of quality professional. How do we go to a next? What could be the next? That we can come up. We can either we stay on the time or we are trying to go ahead of the time. So there was a need and there is a need. So I think what you are touching upon is excellent thing, and we need to embrace, we need to follow, we need to understand, and we need to take it into our own functionality. It could be academic, it could be industry, it could be services, or it could be farm level. But these are very essential. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'll take it forward. Some of this is purely management stuff. So if you are, some of you are from
excuse
engineering.
me, sir.
Yes, Dr. Shanti.
I have a question. Some of the concepts of TQM and Six Sigma, so the onus is taken by one particular department in any company. So in case of design thinking, who is taking the onus? Do you think that Indian organizations are ready? So who will basically take a responsibility in the modern organizations?
Okay, that I think, ma'am, that will get answered in the process, the way it is being delivered. So just have some, bear with me. It will get answered. Let me tell you also that I am a statistical quality control specialist. I am also an operations specialist from nothing less than Indian Statistical Institute. So when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you with full responsibility and an authority of the knowledge on this.
Yes.
Whatever the TQM knowledge we have talked about, I have been trained in that thoroughly well. So I'm very happy that Dr. Sunil said that there is a need, at least there is a perceived need, that we have to move from where we are to something different at a higher level. And that is what the perspective I want to leave that with you today, so that all of you can develop those things further in your own academic or the business, in whichever you are engaged in, and your question will get answered. Okay, now let me give you, there was a question about 2 days ago by one of the participants saying that what is the difference between innovation and design thinking. Now, I have to share here with you a small story of what happened in 3M. In 1968, a scientist in 3M named Dr. Spencer Silver, he was working on attempting to find a superior glue or an adhesive in his company. And by accident, he developed a low tax reusable, the glue or adhesive, and if you put pressure, it will stick to something, and then it can be peeled off very easily. And he did not know what to do with that. So that was an invention a scientist did, trying to develop something. He got something else, but he didn't know what to do with that. From 1968 to 1974, for about 6 years, he had given several presentations in 3M to their internal managers and the staff and scientists on, this is the product that I have, how best we can make use of. And he did not find any takers. So inventions can happen without the concern or the user's interface. And in 1974, there is another guy called Arthur Fry in the same company working, and he used to go to his church every week. And when he goes to the church, he used to keep some bookmarks in his Bible. And those days, bookmark means, you take out some paper, make it into small pieces, and insert them in the page that you want to use, so that you're able to reach that page easily. And when he was going to the church and trying to open those pages, sometimes the bookmarks will fall off, and then he would find it difficult to reach out to those pages and those verses to be read in the church. So he had this difficulty as an user. And when he attended the seminar of Dr. Spencer Silver, he got an idea that he thought that this might be useful to him. So what he did immediately is he started. It was a sort of a bootlegging exercise. Without really speaking to Spencer Silver, he started using that particular glue and picked up some yellow scrap paper that was available in his office and applied to that paper, started sticking it into the bookmarks, using it as a bookmark. And that worked fantastically well. What are the two qualities that he has noticed there? One, when he removed that paper from the Bible, it did not damage the print quality of the paper like any other glue effects. Number two, it was so thin that it did not really matter for the thickness of the book. So after using it and satisfying for a while, he prepared those kinds of pads, what we call the post-it pads, which is typically used globally now, or sticky pads, and he started supplying internally through his stores. He did not announce to anyone. He just gave them to the stores and said, keep sending it to various departments. And to his surprise, several departments, without knowing the product, they started reordering through the store. So when the first was over, they started writing to the store saying that, please supply me one more. Then that was the time that Arthur Fry realized that there is a demand for this. And later on, I don't want to get into the full story. This is the second part, is what I think is the design thinking. Here is a user. He had a problem and he was trying to find a solution. And then he found a product which was an innovation of somebody else. Both put together created a great product. And finally, the company 3M enjoyed the intellectual property rights on this product for about 20 years. And they made phenomenal amount of money out of that. All that happened because there was a user-centric design thinking approach, though they may not have known that it is design thinking. But the process he has done was this, and most of this experiment was done by him at his home. And finally, of course, he was also a beneficiary of the patent that happened. So, and today, if you look at companies like 3M, I think they have actually institutional, although they're all talking, we all talk about innovation capabilities there, but beyond innovation, there is an integration of design thinking in many of these organizations. So how do we understand design thinking as a capability? A design thinking capability is the company's ability to deploy design practice to support its innovation efforts on strategic and functional levels. So this is what we are now talking about. Design thinking is not for operational guy. It is for the top management. It has to be top driven. Unless the top guy is able to understand and appreciate design thinking, I don't think we will be able to make much progress. And hence I'm trying to make this as an agenda for the top management. Now, how to map out a design capacity in the organization? Do you know whether such capability is there in the organization, and how does it get translated into institutionalization of the organization? Here I will take up this model, and maybe in about 15 minutes or so, then we will have a larger amount of discussion. So the model is something like this, and it is still to be evolved. Many more people will write, and many more much more research will be done. It essentially has your ability to implement design thinking in the organization, and your ability to develop that collaboration. I think today, I know most of you are teachers. after the pandemic and we have all started conducting the classes online and doing evaluations online, did you ever have an opportunity to discuss this, how to conduct these classes, how to do these evaluations and all in the organizations from multiple functions and multiple departments? Or is it usually, you know, somebody from the exams department or the academics department instructs you and you did it? Was there any brainstorming on any of these things? Was there a process, or is it just, you know, somebody has said this and you are doing it? What is your experience?
So it was brainstormed more often, and every time we had a little bit of problem, people would come and somebody must have faced it and came out with a different way. Then again, somebody has come up with other query and they came up whether they had experience or is it something new for everyone and how they dealt with it.
Okay. So there was some amount of brainstorming. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, sir. We also had brainstorming. We evaluated multiple tools that can conduct various types of evaluation. We took cognizance of opinions from different departments. As you very rightly said, it could be exam, it could be student welfare, it could be IT department to tell us the network and bandwidth issues. We did have the brainstorming session, sir. This is Dr.
Okay.
Nilesh. Yeah, Symbols.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Nilesh. Thank you. You know, what you have just now described is because it is an evolving situation. But if most of you, when you join the educational institutions, maybe most of us have been given the orientation of what everybody does, including the examinations and academics, but you have not been involved in any design process or the brainstorming process. Because once it is stabilized, you started getting, inducted into it and you just followed. Because of the challenge, all these things are happening. So there is, in a way, the organizations have realized in a changing dynamic environment, solutions cannot come from only one person or two persons or one department or two departments. There is a need to collaborate. Then the third one is the user's involvement. In all this, while what you have said is very right, the departments would have discussed and deliberated and brainstormed. It is very unlikely in any of these institutions, students were also co-opted into this discussion. Most likely, I would presume that students have been told that this is how we are going to do. Very few institutions, if at all, would have involved the students also to get their perspective into the online education. So, but that is also an important thing, and we will see how to institutionalize that. Then the next level is the importance of design thinking in the front-end phase of the development process. What are those components of front-end phase? I will deliberate with you. And finally, take it to the strategy. It is take it to the boardroom level and let that be ingrained as a part of the DNA of your organization. These are the perspectives I am going to spend some time on, and please bear with me. Now, what is the evolving design thinking process? Now, initially, design thinking was considered to be more of a design process, which was a result of the industrialization, post-industrialization product, the physical appearance, the aesthetics, and all that has come in. And therefore, it was mainly the cognitive style of the cognitive schools of design thinking has evolved then. But now the cognitive schools have given rise to more of, it is general theory of design, where we are now thinking that it is beyond the aesthetics. We need to solve many problems. Some of them are wicked problems. Now, if I have to give you an example of how a wicked problem was solved, I will again take you back to the milk example I had used earlier. In 1960s, in India, if you want to have milk the way you are consuming milk today, it would not have been imaginable. It would not have been possible. A lot of milk was supplied through imported milk powder, reconstituted into milk, and India did not have the affordability to buy milk powder. We were importing the milk powder which was being dumped in the sea. From there onward, today, India is a milk surplus country. So in about 60 years, India has emerged as a milk surplus country. Now, that is a very difficult problem, because you have to produce milk, which is produced in small households across across the nation, then collecting that and supplying it to the cities, converting into various products and meeting the demand is not an easy task. Such a difficult, complex problem of the society could be solved at that point in time. It just did not happen without much of planning and involvement of various specialists in that. It was not a technical problem solved. It had many dimensions, and all of them have been very well resolved. So that is now the general theory. Several of these wicked problems which are now there in the society the answer can well lie in the design thinking. So from the cognitive style, we are now moving to the general theory of design. And the moment you say it is general theory of design, it is coming into the domain of the management experts and management thinkers. And therefore, I feel in the next few years in India too, we will have several business schools offering this design thinking as a specialization course, not only for the business management students, for many people across the functional areas. Let me go into that model and explain you what this design thinking implementation means. First of all, the moment you say it is design thinking implementation, you must be believing that it's an iterative process where you need to go through several rounds before you finally come to an understanding of what possibly could be a solution. The next one is there's a paradox here. Yes, there's a paradox here. While design thinking requires multiple inputs and a multifunctional approach, it has to be seen in terms of implementation as a linear process. I think Dr. Nirmala asked, who is responsible for this? Now, we cannot keep everything open. We cannot say there are no bounds for everything. So design thinking requires flexibility. Design thinking requires multiple perspectives. But then design thinking implementation needs to be linear, because without that, you will not be able to reach the solution in the organizations. Number 3, design thinking has to be a mindset, which describes when the company has the work attitude, that is all the employees of the organization have that attitude towards creative problem solving based on these principles of user focus, problem framing, experimentation, visualization, and diversity, or any other model it chooses, then you will first initially you will diverge, but ultimately your objective is to converge into what you want to achieve. And therefore, design thinking implementation requires tools and techniques, processes, and mindset. And this was very well articulated in the new model of design thinking, what I had shown you yesterday by the Design Council. And it requires collaboration across the functions, within the department and across the department, and sometimes cross projects, so that you will get effective solutions. I think in the one model that I had shown you yesterday, I have given you the example of iPod, and it is not just cross-functional or intra-departmental, it was also cross-project collaboration. And what it really means is you have the cross-functional promotes better team dynamics. Intra-departmental, the entire team is involved in the decision-making and discussion process, and that is an involved approach of solving the problems. And it has been noticed in the traditional way of trying to solve the problems. One of the major reasons why even big companies have failed is either the problem between the teams, or the tension between the teams, or tension between the people have probably killed some new ideas in the organizations, sometimes killed even the business opportunities for some organizations. But for those intra-fighting among the teams within the organization, some companies would have been able to prosper much better. I don't want to get into those case details, but I do have some case studies where organizations have not been able to leverage their strengths to create new businesses just because of lack of collaboration within the organization. Forget about anything outside, within the organization. Therefore, design thinking requires collaboration, and that collaborative attitude is what we need to develop. And being faculty members generally are very, very independent. Even teachers have to today think of collaborating from one department to the other department. Otherwise, we will also have some difficulties as we move forward. The third one, of course, is user involvement. We have discussed one very important, personal example of what Mr. Sayantan has participated and got the benefit of it. That applies in every situation. Greater user inclusion with the design process results in superior solution. Why every product of iPhone, the Apple, whatever comes out of this table is considered to be much more superior and successful? Why are they considered to be ahead of time? Is perhaps their ability to institutionalize the user involvement. And if you want to learn something about how to institutionalize this process or the capability, I think we have to learn a few lessons from there. Then the difference between retrieving information from users through questionnaires and involving users in co-design has to be understood. Marketing process or the market studies or market research tells us primarily the first part. You go and deploy a set of people in the market and tell them to conduct some survey and then use it for some design purposes, but that is not enough. What design thinking is advocating today is use the user as a co-designer in your entire process. Maybe you will have a superior way of working. And how do you do it? I think those mechanics and logistics, I'm not talking about it now, but this I am talking to you like the TQM. Design thinking is the next level of organization level philosophy. Reflect on to what extent users are involved in the company's product development process. It can be changing from one company to the other company. Then I spoke about the importance of design thinking in the very beginning. Design, like in quality, when the quality movement happened, we all advocated quality cannot be injected into the product after the product is manufactured. Quality has to be ingrained, or quality has to be inbuilt into the process. Therefore, we had those at that point in time in process quality control and end product quality control. But likewise, design thinking cannot be brought in at the later parts of our whatever the model that we have talked about. It has to be from the very beginning till the end, and it has to be a seamless process. And from that point of view, I think it's important for us to understand the design thinking has to actually bring in the focus on the early stages of any development process. Development processes, the product vision, solution design, opportunity mapping, and customer insights. Now, these things were not used in the last couple of days. Therefore, let me explain you what do we mean by product visioning, solution designing, opportunity mapping, and customer insights. Now, product visioning is when design thinking is relevant to identify the necessary product attributes to meet customer needs. You are just visualizing. It is not that you have designed a product. It's just a thought, and it is what you intend, you think will be the product. But then that will finally probably undergo some change. So that is where you draw a product, you put your sketches, put it together to discuss with your teams. The solution designing is basically, it captures the relevance of design thinking to identify how an idea or a concept may align with what are the persona that you are thinking, what are the customers' needs of those personas or the user needs of those personas, and whether your organization has the capability. You may imagine, you may envision so many things, but do you have the internal capabilities, and does it strategically fit into your organization? I think this is where design thinking, I'm bringing it as a concept of strategy. Unless strategically it is aligned, design thinking does not work. Some people are asking, and the first day I think to Mr. Ravikant, whether design thinking will fail. Yes, if the team within the organization works something which is not strategically aligned to the organization's goals, then design thinking is not going to be a solution. You need to fit into the overall organizational goals. Only then your ideas will work. That is why it has to have the buy-in from the top management. Then opportunity mapping is analyze the relevance of design thinking and identify unarticulated customer needs. This is a very, very profound statement. Now, like in the last few days, we have discussed this particular concept. Now, if you ask somebody, before the automobile was invented, if you'd ask somebody, what is your need as a customer for reaching faster, probably they would have said a better fed horse, a better fed, cart, a better made cart, and then I want to reach faster. The customer per se would not have imagined that an automobile is a solution for the problem of reaching fast, because his thinking is limited by what he has been seeing. Similarly, Akio Morita, if he had gone and asked people what type of entertainment that you wanted before he released the Walkman into the market, nobody would have imagined something like a Walkman could be designed and Walkman could be sold at an affordable price. So it is not just easy to identify the unarticulated customer needs. In fact, we never thought that in one small instrument like this, so many things can fit in. That is where the short myopic thinking of IBM, they said the global, when they were making the mainframes, and somebody asked what is the potential business for the laptops, they thought it'd be maybe 5 or 10. They never thought their mainframes will be replaced by the laptops, and we never thought laptops will be probably substituted by a small thing like this. So the unarticulated need has to be somehow identified by way of getting connected to the user. That is where you will do the opportunity mapping, and the customer insight is explore the relevance of design thinking in identifying behaviors and attitudes that drive consumers and shape their cultures and communities. Now, this is, somebody, the other day, somebody was telling me, in India, we will never have the self-driven cars. In India, we will not have so much market for electric cars, because in some parts of the country, we still have the deficit of electricity production. The households do not have electricity. Where do you supply electricity for this? And the roads are so bad, the civic sense is so bad. How can we have the electric cars, the self-driven cars here? These are all the challenges. These are all the wicked problems for which I think the approach of design thinking can get us solutions is my view. Now coming to the more attention you pay to the end user or the user of the product, the better you will have a better product, and probably the whole system or the process of design thinking is developed in such a way that if at all there is a failure, the failure will be at a lower cost, not at a great cost for the organization. Now, the final step in the design process capability model is design thinking as an organizational strategic thinking. Now, it is necessary to analyze your competitive effectiveness of design thinking in your own organization and build the necessary competencies, build the necessary mindset, build the necessary attitudes in the organization, and develop that competency through training programs to train the trainers, then create some collaborative spaces. I think one thing that probably it requires is get rid of this mindset of having cubicles for each employee, have an open mind and an open office. The moment you have this, the traditional office setting itself, if it is an impediment in your effort to create design thinking, maybe you'll have to change the way the people work, the change way the people sit in the organizations, and make a culture which is open, collaborative, working together kind of a culture, and provide the basic required resources to your employees if you want to leverage your organization for future challenges. Now, this is a purely management concept, but I just want to touch upon this. We will not go into the details of this. Business environment, everybody now says it is a VUCA environment. What is VUCA? Can anybody expand the VUCA term?
Volatility,
Uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Sir.
Yeah, volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. And all of us know that it is only increasing. It is not now. Actually, Charles Handy said some 40 years ago that in the future of managers is going to be working in this VUCA kind of environment, and it is manifested today. So in a dynamic business environment, I think one of the problems of TQM movement and the models and the tools of that are not equipped or geared up or designed or developed to meet the dynamics of the current environment. And therefore, in this kind of dynamic business world, you need to have a way of solving those problems that our companies and the customers have, and the model that probably is likely to evolve is that you need to leverage your design management skills or design thinking skills to internally develop your internal assets, primarily the human assets, and deal with the competition to be able to stay at the forefront of your business. There are several examples which have failed in the recent past. I think maybe one can write a case study on why Nokia has failed, not from the marketing perspective or the positioning perspective, from the design thinking perspective. Maybe how the companies in Korea are probably battling out with the products that are coming from China, and China, how it is able to leverage some of these concepts that we've talked about in the current business environment to create their dominant position in the markets. These are some areas that one can explore to write some important, useful business, research papers. How do you embed the design thinking as a core value in the organization? Now, all of us know the first problem as Indians we face is, if you fail in anything, your organization does not respect you. You have the fear of losing your job, losing your employment if there is a failure. Hardly any employer is known to be encouraging failure, and therefore the first thing is managements across the industry should now cultivate and appreciate if there is a genuine failure in an attempt to improve the business, that should be accepted, because failure is only one step closer to success. So if you fail today, you are actually doing a lot of good to your organization tomorrow, is what you should, the organization should change, and that should be cultivated. Second is, they must create some role models for design thinkers in the organization, and therefore identify, celebrate, reward those design thinkers in the organizations. Then, as I mentioned to you, change the way that we are working. I think our ways of working are very, very, what are the models that we have in the business administration in terms of designing offices? They're all more than 50 years old. We have been following the same way of sitting and working in departments and silos for 50 years. Probably it is time to break those kinds of thinking and see how do you create an environment where people from across the departments can collaborate, and yet the work can be facilitated. Where is there a need for departments to be designed as exclusive wings and physical spaces in a computerized environment, or can there be an alternative to do that? Because technology gives us to work from anywhere. If I can work from home and continue to work in office, why should I sit in a physical location in the same department all through the year in the office? Can we break that and look at new models of designing the offices? Then create a multidisciplinary ecosystem. In every organization, instead of only talking about specific disciplines, can we look at employing people from multiple disciplines and change the way we measure things in the organizations? From the perspective of design thinking, whether what is being measured in the companies today, should that be changed? Question each of those assumptions which have happened in the last 50, 60 years of progress, and then look at what new measures have to come. Then only the change will happen towards a moment in the design thinking. Now, that is what the perspective on creating design capability in the organizations. And I will take maybe another 3-4 minutes to explain what should be the capabilities of a design thinker. When I'm talking of design thinker, it can be anyone. It need not be from anyone from engineering or design or technical background or an architect. It could be anyone in the organization. The first capability is very dynamic mindset. He has to have, or he or she has to have, a mindset that sees problem solving as an iterative process and is able to easily move from one inventive thinking and generate new ideas and progress towards reaching an acceptable, more feasible solution. Then it should be human-centric, is concentrated on with the understanding of how people who are impacted by that problem, they should be able to understand that. Then he should be empathetic. We have already discussed enough about it. then I think this visualization technique is very, very important. And this visualization technique is not easy to gather, and it has to be, probably people have to be exposed to that. And the ability to live with the ambiguity, right? I think that is, most of us from engineering background or the technical field, we do not accept ambiguity, whereas the people from arts, they don't mind accepting their ambiguity. I think this is the combination that we are looking at. We have to change our mindset there. Ability to engage with prototyping, then reflecting on the feedback that we receive from our stakeholders and learn something for improving the ideas. Then open to risk taking. Risk taking has to be inculcated from the school days, by the teachers, and from their childhood at home by the parents. Then only a design thinking culture can set into the organization or into the society. Embracing failure is something that has to be encouraged, as long as it is done with a productive purpose, with genuine purpose. And collaboration is important. And being optimistic is, you must believe that all problems have at least one solution, however wicked the problem may be. So these are the capabilities we can develop. The competencies of design thinker are these things, and how do we bring those things into the organization is very, very important. So with that, I have completed my presentation regarding the design thinking capability. Now, having gone through this program and understanding the different perspectives of design thinking and the design thinking process, and as explained by my collaborator, Mr. Sayanth, and various steps and how to implement that, you have seen what next you should all do. In my opinion, it is not enough to stop with this FDP of 5 days on design thinking alone. I think you must go through another program on emotional intelligence. Then design thinking usually should lead to some kind of innovation in the organization, and therefore one must have also the ability, learn the ability to monetize the innovation or commercialize the innovation. I think that perspective, or those tools and techniques of how do you commercialize your innovation, is another thing that you all should build on. And the third, last but not the least, is if design thinking is leading to intellectual outcomes like the innovations, then we must also learn how to protect those innovations, and hence you must attend a program on intellectual property rights. I think with that, I will stop here and take these questions before I finish the last slide. Yeah, if there are any questions, I don't know how far I've been able to inspire you to do what I've thought, but this is something which I think is the integration of what we have done in these 4 days. And I would be very happy to hear from you, your perspectives, and answer any questions.
Sir, may I?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Sir, it was definitely wonderful journey that you and your team has taken us through. Still wanted to know what are kind of initial team member that we should have, either in education or in industry or in service, wherever we think and we can think of, and what are the methodologies and some processes that is needed to undergo initially. And for that, how one should be exposed of, and what kind of team size or team team mix should be consisting of. Some kind of broad guidelines, if you can still talk, if time permits and if you feel.
Okay. Good question. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir. I made a note of it. I'll reflect on that. Yes, sir. Yes.
Deepa here.
Sir, please show the third slide, last slide, sir. Conclusion slide. Hello. Sir, please show the last slide, conclusion, sir.
No, that I will come back.
Okay.
Sir, I just had a vague thought. If, for example, we start going into the future and start employing design thinking methodologies, or I'm just taking a scenario like for example, in employment. I'm just taking a small scenario, maybe vague, maybe crazy. I don't know. It's just a thought that came up. If, say, for example, employees were hired from different locations across different destinations in the world, where, you know, virtually if we start meeting each other, or yeah, say for example, a teacher from the south is working in an IIT or a premier institute or a non-premier institute, any college across India's boundaries, or let's say internationally, it is going to be very easy and possible through the virtual outlet, right? So would this have an implication probably in the employability of the new generation? Or do you think that it can actually help or stall see, so if we are not getting an opportunity in a rural area, you are just moving down to the cities. Am I right? So you're just trying to find there, and then there is a lot of property management. There is a lot of infrastructure development in that particular places. You find development. People are moving from the rural areas to the cities. But sir, if we start employing these design thinking opportunities across in different spheres, don't you think it will develop opportunities, or it might stall certain developmental opportunities? What could be your say?
Okay.
And I
so,
appreciate the whole process, sir. It has been a evolving phase for, actually, I don't know, I found myself to be evolving over the 4 days of discussions, and I'm just probably thinking, I don't know where am I confused, or I'm getting a clarity over it, or I have to go in depth, or I have to find answers. Anyways, thank you for this presentation, sir. I appreciate all your efforts, and I think I'm slowly embracing the concept of design thinking. Thank you.
okay, that's good. Very satisfying to hear that. Now, before I answer that, I think if Mr. Sayantan is there, because he comes from the industry purely and is a practitioner, I would like to hear from him, because he has worked in the rural part of Tamil Nadu. He has worked with a big company like Mahindra. Maybe he would be more, apt in answering that question.
Yeah, firstly, I'll probably, if I am going wrong in understanding the question, ma'am, please help me out in explaining if I understood it correctly. What you are trying to mention is, when we try to implement design thinking, are we going to see certain issues coming up, because it's going to open up a lot of opportunities? Are we going to see some employability issues coming up? Is that your question, ma'am?
Yes, it is also employability. It is also, I mean, would it also invite more number of, I mean, say, for example, if there is a development or something like that. Say, for example, yeah, we don't want today's cities to be crowded, as said. Now, say, for example, I can stay in my own hometown, and I can work for a very good education institute. Yes, I don't have to really move down. For example, a person from a village in Tamil Nadu can work for university in Delhi, or in internationally also. There is no barriers, right? We're going to go virtual, right? And so there could be an employability opportunities, but would it also have some kind of barriers, or probably bringing about some kind of developmental issues, reduction in it, or probably bringing up lesser development? Or what are the challenges? Probably we're looking at the progress and the challenges that this might bring about in the economy as such, in a general across the industries, across the service industries, across every particular development.
Got you, ma'am. So I would say that there are two things that I can see in your question in itself. One is the application of design thinking. The other is things going virtual now and opening up the opportunities. So like yesterday, I think Manikandan sir was talking about that, how easy it has been now to bring an expert from across any part of the world and sharing his or her knowledge to students. So something similar on the same line you are talking. And even if you see a lot of Dubai tourism, they are talking about this, that if you are anyways working from home, why not work in Dubai? So yes, this probably is another thing that is a mega trend, we generally call it, is that's coming up, where people can work from anywhere. Now the question is, what is going to be the implication of this, and do design thinking has any impact on it? I would say most of the things that I can think of is betterment of the whole aspect. Why is it so? Because, say for example, now one guy who probably was going out in somewhere probably in Madhya Pradesh, that guy used to stay some interior part in Madhya Pradesh, and now he got a job in Delhi, tier 1 city. He moved there, he's staying there, enjoying the infrastructure there. Whatever is required for him in Delhi is there. That's why he has to move there. Now, due to this COVID and all, now we are going virtual. So he is back in his hometown. He's working from there now. Probably the very first time when he is there, he's struggling because he don't have the infrastructure over there. He requires something. Now, what happens is, say I am a friend of his, okay, and I am staying in that same place. I see him, he's struggling. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I see somebody struggle is I see an opportunity. What is the opportunity? The opportunity for me is probably to provide him the right infrastructure. Now, if you want to see that how this is coming up, I would tell you that in Bangalore itself, there are at least in 2018, there were 65 co-working spaces. You know what is co-working spaces? Co-working spaces were places where startups come together. I mean, different startups come. There is one place, but like right now, I am sitting in my office at my home. So similar offices are being made for different startups. They come, they get the infrastructure to work, the right internet requirement, everything that's required. There is a meeting room and all the stuff set up. So somebody thought of it. So the first co-working space, whoever have developed, thought of it, that there are small startups who cannot afford to pay rent and all, and create a situation where create the infrastructure required. So that individual, that themselves probably a startup, they created an infrastructure and they started helping other startups to grow. Now, when you are talking of this guy who has probably left a metro city and is back in his hometown, connecting from a virtually from a different place, he maybe when he is struggling, somebody like this guy who have already identified this problem in Bangalore, he identifies that there is an opportunity to help this guy. And not only this guy, every year probably from my village, 10-12 people leave the village, used to leave the village to go in different metro cities and try this out. Now looking at that human, which is this guy who came from Delhi, he's creating or designing a product or a service. That is a human-centered approach, exactly what this individual requires. He can come up and design an infrastructure, design the right environment where this guy does not even feel that he is not in Delhi. And the moment he does that, what happens? Not only one, multiple other co-working spaces grow up, and the city or town, which we used to call as something where hardly will find any young people anymore, the elderly people are only staying there, that starts growing. That no more stays as a tier 3 city. That slowly becomes not, if not same as Delhi, but very close to it. So I see development happening in that way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And no, I think my perspective on that question, ma'am, two things are going to happen. One, because of design thinking, business models will change. The way things have been working, organizations have been working last 50 years, what you and I are aware, will change in the next 5 to 10 years. What those changes, I will not be able to articulate now, but you will be definitely witnessing them. That is number one. Number two, in India, particularly if we start cultivating or developing this attitude or the mindset, we will have more number of entrepreneurs springing up, providing more prosperity to the society and reducing the burden of employment. I think these two things are going to happen in the next 10 years. Whatever we are seeing now, the fruits of it will be felt or enjoyed 10 years from now. Maybe 2030, you will remember these words, and this is likely to happen.
I hope it happens. So thank you, Mr. Sayananthan and Mr. Bhaskar. I think it was a really good one. I also thought it could actually, develop the more the efforts that India has put in over the after the independence should be resulting much more fruitfully in the years to come. Maybe in a lesser time because of design thinking or probably the opening up of the opportunities post COVID. Thank you for the answers. Thank you very much.
In the 1970s and 80s, we used to have an organization called National Productivity Council. It is now defunct. It's not really active. In those days, the concerns were more on the quality dimensions, and a lot of effort has gone in, and that has resulted in certain amount of prosperity for the society and for the employment. Now, this moment, what we are seeing in the last few months, and so many of us getting trained and it's percolating down, it's the multiplier effect of what we are all doing now. It will have significant prosperity effect in the years to come. That is what I can tell you. Yes, the question that Mr. Dr. Sunil Kapadia asked, can there be a process to undergo whatever we have discussed? Yes, that is the very purpose of bringing it. This particular topic, spending and investing our time for 1 hour on this, is some of our fellow colleagues, fellow teachers and researchers will spend time and work on developing models, how to develop this design thinking from the childhood of the students, children, to the higher education, so that we as a society can find solutions to many problems. So my request to you all is apply your mind. This is just as nascent as 3-4 years old. While the design thinking must have thought, the coining of the word must be some 50-60 years ago, but it has not really got into the academics. We have a fantastic journey ahead if you are able to imbibe what we have talked about and start using it for your research. All that I can tell you is only that much, sir, today. Yeah, are there any questions? Otherwise, it's another 2 minutes for the Art of Living session to be started, and 1 minute I will take before that for concluding this session. Just 1 minute. So the conclusion is, design is more than simply the creative expression of an innovative idea. It is a culture. Now, we started off with design as an attitude and design as a mindset. Now I am saying that should be the culture. Design thinking should be the culture of a society. Elevate design strategically in the organizations, then an organization can exceed. Then organization can exceed expectations of stakeholders and advance all its assets, primarily the human assets, and the strong and continuous relationship between design and business can leverage this multifaceted and dynamic capability. I think I've touched upon the culture, I've touched upon the strategy, I touched upon how it can benefit the society from a multifaceted perspective. So with that, I thank you for your, lending me your ears and contributing to this session. And I really enjoyed being with you. And it's just
Professor Rao, can I ask a question? I'm Shubhendu Das from Bhubaneswar.
Yes, sir.
Can you please repeat the name of the glue inventor and the person who thought of the sticker notes?
Okay. The first one is the scientist whose name is, I will just tell you the name of the scientist. The second one is Arthur Fry. The one who has invented the glue stick is the Michael Fry. The other one is Dr. Spencer Silver.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, with that, we will close this session. Thank you all for your cooperation. We are just right on dot, and Vijayaji and Meenakshi ji are there on the meet, and exactly at 5 we are handing over the session to them to take us through the Art of Living on the 3rd day. Thank you both, ma'am, for being with us, and we welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So it's let's start with Vijayaji, you'll need to unmute yourself.
So it's so nice to be here. Meenakshi ji?
Ji. Hanji.
If you wish, you can switch on your videos, so we'll be able to help you better. Again, today we will do chair yoga. We will sit in our chairs comfortably.
desktop yoga. Hands, you can place them either facing the ceiling or downwards. Let's close our eyes. The normal breath in. Breathe out. One more normal breath in. And relax. You may slowly open. As you breathe in, the head goes back. As you breathe out, the head comes forward. As you breathe in, the head goes back. As you breathe out, forward. As you breathe in, the head goes back. As you breathe out, forward. As you breathe in, bring the head to the center. Now to the right. We do each one 3 times. Upward movement, you breathe in, downward, you breathe out. Turn the head to the right. Breathing with awareness is key. Now, bend your head as you breathe out to your right and now to the left. Your ear should touch the shoulder. 2 more times. As you breathe in, now circular rotations. 3 to the right and 3 to the left. Eyes remaining closed. Feel the stretch. Neck rotations should be done slowly and you should be in control of your movement. Neck rotations. Voice direction, rotate your neck.
The other side.
As you breathe in, raise the shoulders. Breathe out. 3. my shoulder. Now the left. Forward.
We can do the alternate nostril breathing.
Yes.
The Nadi Shodhan Pranayam. Yeah. The left hand is in this mudra where the index and the thumb are lightly touching each other, and it's the palm. This hand is placed over the thigh with the palm facing upwards. Yeah. And then we have both the fingers, the index and the middle finger, in between the brows. Let's take 9 long deep breaths while doing the alternate nostril breathing. So closing the right nostril with your thumb. Inhale from the left nostril. Close the left nostril. Exhale from the right nostril. And then inhale from the right nostril. And exhale from the left nostril. This is one round. Like this, let us do 8 more rounds, all by ourselves. Relax as you complete this round. And very gently, you may open your eyes. Yeah. There is a pranayam called the Bhramari pranayam, which is very effective in calming the mind and enhancing focus. So when you're doing prolonged periods, you're sitting at the desk and using the mind, then it's always good to do the Bhramari pranayam. Vijayaji, can you guide us through the Bhramari pranayam, please? Thank you.
Sure. For somebody raised their hand, was there? That should be now. Can Aisha or somebody? Will continue. Okay.
So the little finger is. Yeah, please. I'll mute myself.
No, the ring finger is beneath the nostrils. The middle finger is near the bridge of the nose. This and the thumbs are placed slightly on the ears. The ear caps. This is where they're placed. So this is how your hand will look. And this finger goes here on the forehead. These fingers, with these will manipulate your ears. Breathe out. Breathe, and as you breathe out, make the sound and move your thumbs, which are on your ears. Okay? Breathe in, and as you breathe out, it will come as a humming sound. In this, okay. Now we'll do with our eyes closed. 3 times we will do with our eyes closed. Let's breathe in with a smile, and as we breathe out, once again breathe in. One last time, breathe in. And we breathe out. Relax. You can place your hands on your knees, palms facing the ceiling. Observe the breath. And very, very slowly and gradually, you may open your eyes. How was it? Good. So, over to you, Meenakshi ji.
Ji, thank you. So, see, we spend so much time studying in life, right? But we spend very little time studying about life. Yeah. Breath is more tangible than the mind. Mind, is very hard to control. As I mentioned the other day, the more you resist, the more it will persist. So all the listening you do, all the talks you come across, all the books that you read, they won't leave any impact, It's just at the level of the intellect. what actually works is when you work with breath. As we observed the other day, every motion, there is a corresponding rhythm in the breath. Now, what we do through our Sudarshan Kriya technique is we flip it into a two-way street. And the result is we de-link emotions from people, events, and situations. Yeah, this helps us to participate in life fully and still retain a peace of mind. There was I remember it was about 2-3 years back, you know, this was often quoted. There was this United Nations report that says the biggest cause for concern in the world today is that of mental disease. So it is all the more essential to be aware of the mind, the workings of the mind, and also keep the mind healthy and happy. That would reflect on the physical body as well. Yeah. So Fit India, this is such an apt, time to recalibrate and make our health a priority and the physical and the mental health a priority. Yeah. We would like to show you a small video on the Sudarshan Kriya. Just a minute, please. Let me share.
Many of us are familiar with the effects of stress on our body, from headaches to upset stomachs, body aches, and tiredness. But what about the effects of stress on one of our most precious assets, our brain? How about a crash course in what happens to the brain under stress and how we can handle it? Under stress, a physical response is triggered, which directly affects the brain in ways that impede our ability to focus and concentrate. This response limits our ability to connect with friends and colleagues and strains our relationships. You might remember from high school biology that brain cells use chemicals called neurotransmitters to communicate. Under stress, a hormone called cortisol is released, which hinders the functioning of neurotransmitters, making it harder for brain cells to talk to each other. This makes it difficult to think clearly and is the reason why we get confused in a crisis or a stressful situation. Cortisol also causes a chemical reaction that directly kills brain cells. In addition, cortisol triggers the fight or flight response. This directs blood glucose or energy away from the brain to our muscles so we can fight or flee. This can save our lives if we're running from danger, but in daily life, when stressed, the response creates an energy crisis in the brain, which obstructs our ability to learn new things. Fortunately, these effects can be reversed when stress is reduced. Knowing how stress affects the brain, one would think the solution is to simply force the mind to relax. Unfortunately, the mind has a terrible time telling itself what to do. For example, telling your mind to sleep usually leads to little or no sleep at all. Research at Harvard University found that forcing our minds to do something like relaxing just doesn't work. A solution to effectively managing stress and calming the mind can be found in a more tangible tool, breathing, because there's a direct link between breathing and emotions. European researchers studied people watching movies that induced emotions of anger, sadness, and happiness. They discovered that each emotion creates a distinct breathing pattern. They also found that just having people breathe in these patterns induce the same emotions. This demonstrates that we can influence our emotions through our breath. So instead of simply being overwhelmed by our emotions, we can transform them through specific breathing techniques. Numerous independent studies have shown that the Sudarshan Kriya breathing techniques, or SKY, are effective stress management tools. Psychiatrists at India's National Institute of Mental Health found that levels of the stress hormone cortisol are significantly lower in SKY practitioners. Published research from Sweden shows that SKY significantly reduces the stress, anxiety, and depression we face under the demands of everyday living, and increases our optimism and well-being. It's as effective as standard antidepressant drug therapy, is free of side effects, and has less drain on the wallet. SKY can also increase our ability to excel. It has been found to enhance brain function. Published research shows that SKY significantly increases beta brainwave activity, which is associated with heightened alertness and increased focus. Independent research worldwide indicate that SKY is a potent breathing program that significantly reduces stress and enhances brain function. This can improve our ability to focus, solve problems, and understand complex issues. In addition to the physical benefits like lowering cholesterol, boosting immune function, regular practice of SKY relieves anxiety and enhances well-being and positive emotions. In fact, prolactin, a well-being hormone, is shown to significantly increase from the very first session of SKY practice. And it is well known that emotional well-being is directly related to productivity, concentration, learning ability, and success. The benefits of practicing SKY for any business, organization, or family are obvious, and results grow over time. In a world where everyone is under increasing pressure, regular practice of SKY creates a powerful advantage for our mind, body, and how we interact with everyone around us.
That was about this breathing process that we teach. Now, if you have any questions, we'd be glad to take them. What?
Yeah, I think you can tell them, ma'am, what is the best time to do this practicing of these breathing techniques in a day, and how many times one should do?
The what you learned just now over the last few days, these
Yes.
you can do ideally on an empty stomach. Thank you. That was a good question. Ideally, yoga and breathing practices should be done on an empty stomach. Ideally, before stop yoga. So you can sit at your desk and do it anytime your stomach is somewhat empty. Meditation also can be done any time of the day. Only thing is, you do it too late in the evening, it becomes difficult to sleep because there's so much energy generated.
Any other question from anyone? I think the video.
We hope you will incorporate.
No, the video from the Art of Living is very good. Excellent.
That's about Sudarshanika, the breathing technique that is taught in the meditation breath shop. 4 hours online. We take the ground. Okay. So, if anyone wishes to sign up, I think maybe
Right, ma'am.
Professor
Tomorrow
Rao, we can look.
Yeah, tomorrow we are meeting at 4:30, ma'am. Okay. Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, I think we will. We just have another couple of minutes before we take a break, and we'll assemble at 5:45 again for the next session, which is going to be very exciting. A lot of interesting perspectives you will see, and all of you come back and be there from 5:45 to 7:30. It's going to be very interesting, and many insights of what you've learned in the last 4 days will be. We'll be putting together so many things which probably you could not understand in the last 3-4 days. Okay, so we'll meet up at 5:45 again, and those who want to stay online, please stay online. You need not sign off, and we will continue the session. Thank you.